Data nerds, welcome to this full course tutorial on Excel for data analytics. This is the course I wish I would have had when I first started as a data analyst. You're going to be working right alongside me as we master how to use a spreadsheet, starting with the basics of functions, charts, and tables, working our way up to our first portfolio project. We'll then shift gears into advanced features like pivot tables, Power Query, and Power Pivot, ultimately building our second and final project analyzing real-world data. Now to master this tool, we're not going to go straight for 11 hours. Instead, we're going to break it down into 10 to 20-minute lessons. During this, we'll have exercises for you to learn while doing, not just watching, followed by practice problems to reinforce your newly learned skills. Now, Excel is the most popular spreadsheet tool in the world. It's estimated to have over 1 billion users. That's 1 in 8 people in the world. And for data nerds, it's one of the most popular skills for data analysts, coming only behind SQL. Oh, and the same can be said for business analysts in this tool's popularity. Truth be told, Excel was one of the only skills that I knew when I landed my first role in data analytics. But it was able to handle everything thrown at me. And so I've been cataloging over the years all of the most important features to perform data analytics, and I compiled it in this course. And this video is for absolute beginners. You don't need any analytic or spreadsheet experience. We'll be starting with the first half on the basic chapters, which will build up your knowledge on the fundamentals, with covering which versions of Excel you can use for the course, along with installing it. Then we'll get you familiar with working around how to manipulate a spreadsheet. From there, we'll shift into practical exercises, analyzing data using formulas and functions, and then visualizing it using common charts and statistical analysis. At the end of the basics chapters, we'll put your skills to the test to build an interactive dashboard to predict one's salary based on job and location. For the second half of the course, we're going to ramp up our learnings, diving into advanced analytical features, focusing on using pivot tables and add-ins to dive quickly into data insights. We'll learn Power Query to connect to a variety of data sets and perform ETL, or extract, transform, and load. Finally, we'll learn data modeling with Power Pivot and perform advanced calculations with the DAX language. By the end of the advanced chapters, we'll have built a full data analytics project analyzing the data science job market, which you'll be able to share this and the previous project in order to showcase your experience with analyzing data in Excel. Now, I'm a big believer in open sourcing education, so this course and all the content required to complete the course is completely free. I not only get you set up with Excel, but I also provide all the different Excel workbooks and sheets needed to complete this course. With this, you'll get access to the data sets needed to make those final projects and even how to share them. Now, unfortunately, the AdSense revenue alone from this course isn't enough in order to support all the different costs associated with building this. So I have an option for those that want to support and help out. For those that purchase my supporter resources, you're going to get access to a lot of features that are going to help speed up your learning, all provided through this custom dashboard to track your progress. You'll get guided practice problems to perform after each lesson that will not only provide the solution, but also walk you through how to get it. If you get stuck along the way, you'll have access to a community of others in order to jump in and comment and ask for help. Additionally, you'll be getting my step-by-step instructions that walk through each of the lessons as I perform it. And finally, when you complete the course, I'll email you a certificate of completion that you can upload to LinkedIn. Now, one quick shout out before we jump in, and that's to Kelly Adams. She helped me plan out a lot of the different lessons for this course, along with being the brains behind a lot of the different practice problems. And frankly, if I didn't have her help, I probably couldn't have completed this course. So before we go any further with what we need to and actually diving into this course, we need to first understand what is Excel and where the heck it came from. So in order to understand this, we need to go back. Oh, a little too far back. Just right. Ancient Babylon, when we used to trade livestock like it was crypto. Now, it's during this time that we started record keeping. And we didn't have paper, so we used stone, and we partitioned it into rows and columns. During the time of the Romans, they began to perfect this even further with accounting. Eventually, we get some advancements in technology, and we start getting this on paper. This is when the term spreadsheets gets the introduction. This maintained that familiar row and column format in order to catalog different things, spread across different sheets. Spreadsheet. Fast forward to the 1900s, and we'd pack rooms full of underpaid people in order to maintain and keep track of all the different transactions on paper spreadsheets. With the advent of computers in the late 70s, we started to see our first spreadsheet softwares with VisiCal and Lotus 123. Then our boy here decided to revolutionize the world. A little bit. Okay, not with that, but with this.
I'm Bill Gates. Chairman of Microsoft. In this video, you're going to see the future.
Since its launch in 1985, it's been wreaking havoc in the spreadsheet software community, dominating market share. And to continue to dominate over the years, Microsoft has added more and more features. It initially started out to where you'd only be using it for the cells of entering different formulas and forming quick calculations, along with getting different charts and analysis. Shortly thereafter, it was upgraded with pivot tables. And that's my secret weapon to quickly analyzing data, as I no longer have to remember which comes first and index and match. Now VBA, or Visual Basic for Applications, was included in the mid-90s and is a programming language in order for you to automate tasks in Microsoft applications. Now, we're not going to waste any time in this course learning VBA. Frankly, I feel it's outdated. You should learn Python instead. And there's newer tools that actually automate the process of data analysis, like Power Query. This was first introduced as 2010 and then rebranded to Get and Transform, and then rebranded again to Power Query. Sort of similar to what Google does with renaming products. Anyway, this bad boy is like washing down a couple caffeine pills with a shot of espresso. It can ingest and clean so much data in the blink of an eye. Hardcore data nerds call this ETL, or extract, transform, and load. Power Pivot was also introduced during this time of Power Query, and it's like putting your spreadsheets on steroids. This allows us to perform data modeling on data sets greater than 1 million rows, greater than what Excel can actually hold in the spreadsheets. And combined with the power of DAX, or data analysis expressions, we can supercharge our calculations. Fast forward to today, and there's been 2 other major features added to Excel. Copilot, which is basically ChatGPT inside of Microsoft Excel, and Python Excel, which is basically Python inside of Excel. Anyway, Copilot is great. Wait, that's a lie. So I do believe AI chatbots are great at helping us out when we get stuck, but I don't want you to rely on that to actually learn this technology of Excel. And for Python and Excel, you need to know, well, Python. If you don't know this yet, it's completely useless. Now with all these features, it can make it seem like Excel is overwhelming, which I completely get that. But when you focus on the basics and work from there, I think it makes it a lot easier to learn it. And it's also why this course is almost 11 hours long. All right, enough for the history lesson. Let's actually get into the course material and what you're going to need for this. Also, we're going to be going over what data set or what data we're going to be analyzing for the projects for this. With the link provided below, you can navigate to this, which is the GitHub repo that has all the different folders and files needed to take the course. Now, don't understand if you're not familiar with GitHub, we're going to walk through this. This pane here basically outlines all the different folders that you have access to. And if I navigate in something like resources, I can see I have a datasets folder, images folder, and even a problems folder. So for those that purchase the course practice problems, you have access to the problems inside of here, and they're broken down by chapter along with the lesson. In addition to that resources folder, you can see numbered here, we have each of those 8 chapters. And if we navigate into something like Spreadsheets Intro, we have a workbook for each one of the lessons. If you want to download this file, you just navigate to it, click the 3 dots, and click download. But I have an alternate method coming up in a bit. Inside the workbooks, I provide a blank template for you to go through and actually fill in. And we'll be getting to what's in this final sheet of actually being filled in. Now, as we move into the advanced chapters, they're going to have something like the data sheet, where you're going to use the data from the data sheets in order to do different operations. And we'll put those in different sheets as well. So how do we get these files? Well, the easiest way is to come up here to this code and go to download zip. With the file downloaded, all you need is to unzip it. And then from there, it has all the different folders with the appropriate workbooks inside of them. Now, after going through a lesson, I then have practice problems for those that purchase the course perks to go through. Here's the course dashboard that you'll get access to that breaks it all down for the problems based on the chapter itself and then by the lesson. And inside of each of these lessons is multiple different problems for you to go through and work. The other perk that you'll receive with those practice problems are the course notes. These break down the concepts in a similar format of all the different chapters and lesson. Here's the one on Excel install, which is going to be what we're covering next, but it provides all the different background on all the different material that I'm covering this. And it's in the same format that I'm covering it in the video, so you can follow right along. Just as a reminder, there's no requirement to purchase these practice problems or course notes, just help support me. Anyway, what are we actually going to be covering in this data analysis that we're going to be doing inside of Excel? Well, you're going to be taking the role of a job seeker and exploring what are some of the top paying roles along with skills of data nerds. For this, we're going to use the data from my app, datanerd.tech, that has collected to this point up to 3 million jobs. It tells based on a job title and also on a location, what are the top skills. And it not only tells us the salary of these skills for a particular job, but also the salaries of the job jobs themselves. Now, the main data set we're going to be using for the majority of this course is this one here inside the datasets folder of data job salary all. This data set includes over 30,000 job postings from 2023, and it includes a wealth of information such as company name, salary, and location. As we go through these examples, I'm going to be doing it from the perspective of a data analyst, which is their top job in the data set. But as shown here, there's a lot of different other job titles that you can check out and use as well. So feel free to deviate. Additionally, I'll be primarily focusing on the United States, but there's a lot of different countries in there as well. So feel free to plug in your home country and analyze this instead. Now, with any course, you're probably going to get stuck along the way. And so how do you get help for this? Well, I don't recommend just jumping into the comment section and waiting for somebody to help you out. Instead, I recommend using a chatbot like ChatGPT. In it, you can provide whatever error you're seeing, and it will help you out and guide you along the way on what to do. And there's other great options as well, such as Gemini or even Claude. So feel free to use whichever one you're most comfortable with. All right, if you haven't done so already, it's your turn now to go in and download that GitHub repo with all the different workbooks needed for this course. In the next lesson, we're going to be getting into installing Excel and mainly understanding what are the different versions that you can actually get with Excel and which one you need for the course. With it, I'll see you there. Let's now actually get into working with Excel. So in this lesson, we're going to be going through how to actually install Excel onto your computer, assuming you don't have it. But before we get to that, for those that maybe have Excel or an older version of Excel or have different computers, we're going to actually go through what are the preliminary requirements you need to have or set up in order to be able to have the Excel you need for this course. Now, here's a breakdown of the different chapters within this course. That is the rows here. And then for the columns are the different Microsoft products that you can get in order to have Excel. Now, if you're running Excel on a Windows machine, either through Microsoft 365, Microsoft Office at Home and Student, or even an older version of Excel up to about 2010, you're going to be fine with completing all the different course content. However, if you have the Mac version or Mac operating system and Excel is installed directly on that operating system, you're not going to be able to complete the advanced chapter, specifically on Power Query and on Power Pivot, along with the project. And it's similar as well for Microsoft 365 Online, as you won't also be able to complete the advanced data analysis section. Now, if you have any of these first three versions of Excel installed on your computer, you can skip to the next lesson if you want. I'm just be going through before the install process of breaking down each of these different versions so you understand your options, what you can get. So let's get into breaking down all these different versions available. First up is Microsoft 365. Now, with Microsoft 365, you're going to get a host of different Microsoft applications, not only Excel, but also things like Word, PowerPoint, and even Outlook. And there's two major plans that I'm going to recommend for this. Either the family plan, which allows you to give out these keys for these different services to up to 6 people, or a personal plan, which allows you to give it to, well, yourself. Now, I do want to call out that if you're a college student, or maybe you work for a big corporation, you may have access to a free Microsoft 365 plan. So if you're in college, check with your college, and if you work for a business, check for your business if you have access to this, so you don't have to pay money for it. But regardless of that, if money is an issue, Microsoft 365 family offers this free 1-month trial, which I think you can complete this course within a month. So technically, you could do this for free. If you don't want to get charged, you will need to actually cancel before the end of that 30 days. And at that point, you'll still have Microsoft Excel installed on your computer, just everything will be in view-only mode. You won't actually be able to edit any of the different spreadsheets that we've operated on during this course. Let's now move into Microsoft Office Home and Student. Now, this bad boy is the alternate recommendation I'm going to give you if you don't want to pay for a Microsoft 365 subscription. This is only a one-time purchase, and it gives you keys to Microsoft Office so you can install all the different Microsoft products of Excel, Word, and PowerPoint onto your computer for the low price of $150. Similar to Microsoft 365 subscription, this will not only work on a Windows machine, but it will also work on a Mac machine. Let's now move to this last option, because it's sort of in the bundle of it, of Microsoft 365 Online. Now, this version of Microsoft 365 is completely free, but there's sort of a catch to this. Here I am on my web browser, logged into Microsoft 365 Online, and I have access to all the different apps within the browser, including something like Excel, so we can go to it. Now, this version looks very similar to the versions that you can actually install via applications on your Windows or Mac machine. There are limitations, like I discussed before, about Power Query and Power Pivot, so you're going to be limited if you're trying to follow along in this course when we get to those advanced chapters. Also, the layout on the web browser version of this app is much different from that's installed on your computer. So I'm not going to be providing any support in this course on actually having to navigate this. So you're going to have to figure that out yourself. So we've discussed everything except for these Mac versions of Microsoft 365 and Office. So here's a quick recap of all the different features and costs of the 3 major versions of Microsoft that you can get in order to get Excel on your computer for this. Personally, I'm using the Microsoft 365 family plan because it includes all the different features that I need. And it also, I save costs because I'm splitting with my brother, who, now that I think of it, is actually paying for it. But it provides everything that I need, and so it's the one I'm recommending for this course. Now, before we get into the install, I want to briefly show what are the differences between using Mac with Excel installed versus Windows and Excel installed on it. Anyway, here's Excel installed on my Windows operating system. And Excel on this operating system is, in my opinion, the flagship product from Microsoft. So they're investing all of their effort and resources into designing this application to make it the best possible. And then from there, Excel Online and then Excel for Mac are really just copycats of this. Anyway, the 2 main differences and the problems I've run into in the past that Excel for Mac doesn't have are in this data tab. I have a lot of different data sources I can choose from, and that's specifically related to our Power Query lesson. And then finally, it has Power Pivot, which is just completely non-existent on Excel for Mac. Now here I am on a Mac machine, and we can see that it looks very similar to before, but there's a lot of limitations that we're going to find with this. Specifically going back to that Power Query, not a lot of different sources you can choose from. And then Power Pivot is just completely non-existent. And you may be like, Luke, I have a Mac machine. What do I need to do in order to have the most premier version of Excel and use for this? Well, for that, I recommend installing a virtual machine. And virtual machines, like Parallels shown here, allows you to host a different operating system on your Mac machine. This Windows example that I was showing earlier, if I actually expand it out, you can see in the background here, I'm running this on a Mac machine. And I have full capabilities and able to carry out and running Windows on this. Now, I've been paying for and using Parallels over the past 3 years, and I can tell you that the support and the offers from it are perfectly fine, and I love using it. Now, personally, I'm using the Parallels Desktop Pro Edition, but you can get by with just using the Standard Edition. Now, they also have this one-time purchase that you could do, which is $129, but it doesn't get any further updates, and I really like how it actually updates and fixes any bugs that may run into. Now, the other reason why I like Parallels is because it has this coherence mode. I have this blue little icon that I can click up at the top to go into coherence mode. And then, wait for it, it allows me to access any of those windows inside of my Windows virtual machine inside of Mac. So here is Excel running right here inside my Mac. And this is not only limited to Microsoft Excel, but also products like Power BI, which I'm using pretty frequently as a data analyst. I can also run this in coherence mode. But enough about that. Now that we got that out of the way, let's actually get into installing Excel via in your Windows machine or on your Windows virtual machine. So the first thing we need to do is navigate over to Microsoft.com, and I'm going to click up here to Microsoft 365. We're going to be going through setting up the free 30-day version. So I'm going to click this of try for free, and from there start my 1-month trial. It's going to ask me to sync my data. I'm assuming you don't have it. I'm also going to assume you don't have an account, so we're going to create one. I'm going to put in my email address, and then from there, create a password. After providing some personal information, you're going to need to verify your email with the code they send you. Now, to be clear, this is the Microsoft 365 family plan, which after that 1-month trial, is going to be charging you at $99 every year. So if you're just one person and you're trying to switch to the personal plan after this, you'll need to do that at the end or near the end of those 30 days. From there, like any company, they're going to ask for some payment methods. I'm going to just go ahead with PayPal. PayPal's all set. Go ahead and do more paperwork of adding billing address. And with that, I can start trial and pay later. So now that I'm logged in, I want to install the desktop app. So it gives me access to right here. It's going to go ahead and begin this. It's going to ask if I want to allow this app to make changes to your device. Yeah, I trust them. So it only took a few minutes and all the different Microsoft 365 Office apps were installed. So I can just come down to the search bar down here, type in Excel. Let's pop it open, make sure it's working. And in order to get started, you need to sign in order to verify that it's your subscription. So I put in my email and password. And I already forgot my password. Now I'm resetting my password, and now I'm all set up. All right, and we got to agree to some lawyer talk of accepting licensing agreements. At this point, I'm pretty worn out of going through this process, so I'm just going to click through everything. I'm not going to send any optional data. Personally, I don't like to do that. I don't want to personalize right now. And it looks like I'm finally done. All right, I'm into it. And now that we're into Excel, we can see up here, it should have your name or your account that you're going into, and go in here into the blank workbook. All right, so that basically concludes this lesson on installing Excel. I do want to show real quick how easy it is to actually cancel your membership should you want to go about just getting the free version or the free 30-day trial and you want to cancel it before. Anyway, if I go back to my account, I can go in here to manage subscriptions. And here I'm inside my Microsoft account, which tells me I'm subscribed to Microsoft 365 family. I can share it with up to 0 to 5 people. And for that, I just click on it and I can copy a link and provide it to whoever I want to share it with. But we're going to cancel it. So we can go to manage subscriptions right here. And all we got to do is click cancel subscriptions. It's going to have me confirm that I do want to cancel this family plan. Makes me scroll all the way to the bottom after showing me all these different prices that I could get instead. And I'm going to say, yeah, I don't want my subscription. And as I'm filming this on August 27th, it basically says, hey, you still have access to this for 30 days until September 26th. So you still technically have access to it. So if you haven't done it already, it's your turn to now go and install Microsoft Excel via one of the options that I've shown here. In the next chapter, we're going to get into a spreadsheets intro to get you familiar with how to actually use all the different functionality or graphical user interface, GUI, of Excel. With that, see you in the next one. Welcome to this chapter on an intro to spreadsheets. And this chapter has 3 different lessons. In order to understand what we're covering those 3 different lessons, we need to explore some vocabulary with it. So let's jump into Excel. For this lesson, we're going to be focusing on worksheets. And that is basically, as you can see, this tab here called Sheet 1. That is how to manipulate these different cells within this worksheet, or also known as a sheet. In the next lesson, we're going to be going into workbooks. So workbooks basically captures either one sheet, like this one's sheet 1. If I add another one, sheet 2. So it encapsulates multiple different sheets within this program of Excel. And then finally, in the third lesson of this chapter, we're going to be moving into the ribbon, which is up here at the top and has a bunch of different functionality to extend into those spreadsheets, along with using this file tab up here that has a whole bunch of features within it as well. Now, this chapter was designed for those that may not have experience with using Microsoft Excel before. So if you don't fall in that category, as in you've used Excel in your job and you're pretty familiar with all those different features I just shown, you can feel free to skip this chapter and then move into the next one on functions, along with all those different practice problems. But if you're not comfortable with that, stick around, we're going to get into it. All right, so the first thing you need to do is open up that first Excel sheet in the files you should have downloaded from GitHub on 1_worksheets. Inside of here, I have an original sheet that allows you to actually go in and fill in everything we're going to be doing and manipulating during the course of this lesson. Then if you get lost along the way or want to peek ahead to see what we're actually going to do, you can actually scroll over here or select the final sheet to see that. Now I want to make this as big as possible for you to see, so I'm going to go ahead and close out this ribbon up here, and you can just do that by double clicking on any one of these different items up here. And then from there, I also want to zoom in. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom right, and I'm going to just zoom in to about 200% and scroll on over. Now inside this spreadsheet, it has all these different cells. and it's organized in a manner where it has rows, and the rows are labeled with numbers 1, 2, 3, all the way down to about 1,000,000. And then we have the columns, and the columns are alphabetical, and they all go all the way to where they start duplicating, where they'll put another letter in front of the other, and it'll go all the way through XFD. So let's practice some data entry. Here I have a table we're going to be filling in for this lesson. Basically has all the different skills associated with it. And then I want you to actually go through while we're going through this. And you don't have to provide the values I do. You can if you want. But we're going to be filling it in based on our difficulty, when we may have started at our level, and then filling out some other stuff with formulas as we go. So we're going to start first with Excel and then the difficulty. So I'm going to select right here, and I can see which cell is selected because it's sort of highlighted here on this B and also 2. But also right up here next to this formula bar, that is calling out formula bar, we can see that we're calling out the name of B2. So anytime we reference any cells, it first references the column letter and then the row number. So in this case, I'm selected in C7. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this a number. I'm gonna say 4 for myself. As you notice, I just put it right in the box. Alternatively, I can also select the cell I wanna go to and then come up here into the formula bar, press what I want. So I want 5 for Python and go from there. Whenever I press enter, it then goes down to the next cell. So technically I could just go through and enter this all in using my keyboard. And I don't have to click or manipulate at all except to select the cell that I wanted. So those were all numerical values. When we move into the skill known, or whether we know it or not, we want to put in, whether it's known or not, we want to put true or false. This is known as a Boolean value. So typing in something like true, I can see when I press enter, it actually updates to be all caps for this true. So it recognizes the data type of this as Boolean. Now, if you're taking this course, you probably don't know Excel, so we're going to put in false instead. Now, say I want to update the rest of these for false. I can, go through and actually type it up, or I can select this lower right-hand corner of cell C2, and now I can drag these values down and it will autofill it in. Now, autofill's not just limited to Boolean values. Let's say I had something like Luke. I could put that here and just drag it down. It's going to fill in Luke all the way through here. A cool feature about Excel is, say I have something like 1 and then 2, I could select both of these cells, and then when I drag it down, it's going to actually fill in 3 or 4. Now, autofill can also throw you off, especially for dates. So let's say we're filling in when we're starting Excel, which is, we'll put in for today's date. In my case, it's August 27, 2024. I'm going to go ahead, press enter to save that in. It automatically updates to this formatting here in America. If in Europe, you may see the month in a different location. Anyway, if I select this and actually drag down, what you'll see is it will do that auto fill in, but it's not going to keep that same date here. It assumes we want to increment by 1 day. Now, specifically with dates, if I want to change the format, I can actually come up here and I'll expand out this home ribbon again. And right now it's recognizing that the number is of date. And for date, I have a few different options. I can do short date, which is shown here, or even something like long date. I can also go even further, which we'll explore as we get further into this course, into this more number formats. And date actually has a whole bunch of other different options that we can choose from. But for right now, we're just going to keep it this simple date format. And I'm going to click OK. Now, assuming you haven't started any of these, I'm going to go ahead and actually just select all the different cells that I want. And if you were to press delete, it's only going to delete that top cell. And that's sort of annoying because I want to delete all these different cells. Instead, what I'm going to do, if I'm on a Windows machine, I'm going to press delete, or in my case, I'm using a Mac, Windows VM, I'm going to press function delete. And it's going to delete all the different content. All right, I'm also going to go ahead while I'm here, delete all that different content down there. We don't need it. Now we're going to move on to level. Type of data we're going to put into this is text. So in the case of Excel, you're probably a beginner. So I'll put in beginner. And then if I want to, I can go through and fill out different levels for each of these. So Python Advanced, Power BI Advanced, and so on for all these. Now, one thing to notice real quick is for the date, it does specify in here under this home ribbon that it is a date, but all these other one, it just characterizes as general, which is perfectly fine. Now, for these other options down here, let's go ahead and say I wanted to put in beginner for all the rest of these. I can't necessarily drag and drop this, but what I can do is I can actually copy it. Specifically, I could right-click the cell and come up here and copy it, but I don't recommend that. Also, over here on the home menu, they have an option as well to copy or even cut something. So I could select something like copy as well. And it's going to put these marching ants, as they call it, around the cell to tell you that, hey, it's actually selected. And then if I wanted to paste it, I go ahead and select down here and I could paste it down below. But that's not what we want to do. I don't like going through and actually selecting all these different buttons. I want to minimize it as much as possible, and I want to use shortcuts. So in order to stop these marching ants, I can go ahead and press Escape, and I'll select the cell that I want to copy. And from there, I'll press Control C, and that copies it. And then I can go ahead and paste it below by selecting the cell that I want and pressing Control V. Now you'll be noticing that when I'm going through this, I have these shortcuts appearing right here next to me on the screen. So you'll be able to follow along as well as I'm using these shortcuts. The other option is I could cut this. So I could press Control X and then paste it in here, Control V. But this is going to go ahead and take this value out of here. We don't want to necessarily do that. So I'll just copy this again, Control C, and then paste it right above here, Control V. Shortcuts are going to be a big time saver, and we're going to be using them a lot throughout this course in order to save you time and having you to go back to your mouse in order to manipulate it and select the different cells. All right, so let's step this up a notch, and we're now going to get into using formulas. And formulas are denoted by whenever we go into a cell like difficulty here, which we want it to be on a 1 to 10 scale, we denote formulas by an equal sign. And in this case, we want the difficulty to be on a 10-point scale, basically transition from that 5-point scale. So we need to multiply it times 2. So we could do something like 4 times 2. And I press enter, and it's going to give me, as I expect, 8. But I actually don't recommend hard coding values that are already inside of Excel here, specifically this 4. So instead of this, I'm going to remove this, and I can either type in the cell coordinates of the cell. So I could type in B2. And as you notice, it's highlighting one, the B2 is blue, but then the cell B2 is highlighted in blue. Alternatively, I could have an equal sign here and just go over and actually select it as well. Whenever I press enter, it's going to go ahead and say, hey, it's 4. Now that I'm referencing that 4, I want to say that this is 4 times 2. Pressing enter, we have 8. Once again, we're going to use that power of autofill. So I can select that cell of F2 and now drag it down. And what's going to be pretty interesting about this is the 2, as denoted in the formula bar, and actually whenever I click into it as well, the 2 remains the same. But autofill automatically knows to adjust the formula or the cell coordinates for the next cell down based on how I did that autofill. Just to show this as well, I could say, hey, let's equal this to B6 right below it. And then if I were to drag this over, it's going to then put in C6, D6, E6, and then F6. So pretty cool. We'll go ahead and delete this. Now the last column we're going to be filling in is skill and level. We're also using a formula for this. And we'll set this equal to this skill thing and also this level. So I'll start by putting in an equal sign, and then it's not on the screen right now, but I know it's in A2. And I can see that selected by scrolling over here. Now, how am I going to get in that F2? Well, I can do an ampersand now. And from there, I'll put in F2, and it has this selected as well. Pressing enter. I ended up doing the wrong one. Sorry about that. Should have been E2. And now I have Excel beginner, but there's no space in between there. This is sort of hard to read. So what I can do is actually manipulate this to include another ampersand. And then in between this, I'm going to put quotes. And this is, hey, insert this text character in between it. Specifically, I want to have a space, then a dash, and then another space. And then press enter. Now, if I tried to do this without the quotes, if I just did this and press enter, I'm going to get a typo in my formula. You have to actually put those quotes around to show that it's text. And it's trying to correct it for some minus sign. I don't really like how it's doing it. Oh my gosh, it's freaking out now. Anyway, I put the quotes back in there, pressing enter, boom, we have it. And like before, I'm going to just do autofill to fill all those in. So let's zoom out a little bit because we're going to now be working with ranges, which is a collection of cells. Now, if you notice, whenever I select, in this case, I'm selecting B2, it says B2 up the top. But if I go to select more of this, it will actually call out that 5R or 5 rows by 2C or 2 columns. And then when I let go, it just goes back to B2. Anyway, ranges are a selection of multiple of cells. So if I come over here to I1, put an equal sign, and then if I want to say copy this entire range, I can go ahead and select this all. So it's saying it's A1 colon G6. So it's starting at the upper left-hand corner of A1 and the bottom right-hand corner of G6. Now this is pretty cool. There's a new feature of Excel of dynamic ranges. It's going to go ahead and fill this in. There's only one formula in here of that A1 through J6, but you see that it has this shadow border around here that's showing that this dynamic range is now filling in for all these different things. And if we look at the formula bar, it's sort of grayed out here too for it. Only at the very beginning does it show that A1 and G6, and then you could manipulate it. So if I wanted to, I could change it to G5, and it would just go down a row. Now we're not limited to just that. We could, in fact, select an entire column. So in this case, I'll put an equal sign, and let's say I want to do the full column of column A right here. I can select up here, A. It's going to select all the way down. And if we go over to the formula bar itself, we can see that it's saying A colon A. That means all the contents of column A are going to be included in this. And from there, it's putting a copy, putting all these different things. And then when there's not a value in it, because it's a copy, similar to over here for these dates of 0, we're going to see 0 in all these different values all the way down. Now, similarly, I can also do a copy of a row. So in this case, if I wanted to, or multiple rows, if I wanted to do rows 5 and 6, I could press enter. I'm going to get an error with this though. And that has to do with this Q column right here that we're copy and pasting here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that real quick, get rid of it. And now we have that rows 5 and 6 duplicated below, along with that shadow around it, and all there. Now these ranges are going to save us a lot of time later. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this right now. I don't want any of that. As later on when we get into actually using functions within formulas, I can use something like the average function, put in a range in here, so it selects all of it, and then get the average of it in this case. Now, one last thing to note on this before we wrap up here on how to save this is you may have noticed that this date started over here is a number. And that's because that's how Excel stores dates within this spreadsheet right here. So if I actually click on it, go back up to home, right now it's storing it under the format of general right now. So if I were to make this into an actual date, we can see that it is in fact 8/27/2024. Now, just some fun little trivia. If I were to put in number 1 and transition it to a date, so coming up here and selecting date, that first date starts at January 1st, 1900, and then they move on the numbers from there. All right, last thing we need to do is now save the work that you just completed with this. You can do this multiple different ways. We can come up here to the top of your Excel workbook right here and click save. You can also, as shown, you can use Control S. Alternatively, you can come over here to the file menu and then come on down to save or save as. And then if you wanted to, you can specify the location where you actually want to save your file and save it there. Now you do have the option, which I highly recommend if you're working with real world files, you want to actually save them, to save this autosave feature. The one caveat to this is that your files have to be stored on OneDrive. Right now with the plan that I have, I can store about 1 terabyte of files on there. So if you'd like to do that, feel free to transition your files there. I'm not going to, and I won't have autosave on for this, but for very important files, I definitely do have autosave set up. All right, for those that have purchased the practice problems and notes, you have some practice problems to go through and get even more familiar with manipulating cells inside of a spreadsheet. After that, we're going to be going into manipulating a workbook. With that, see you in the next one. All right, we're going to be continuing on with this spreadsheets intro, focusing now on workbooks. So previously we were focusing on worksheets, which are a sheet inside of a workbook. Now we're going to be focusing on manipulating and moving data between workbooks. Now for this, I don't want you immediately jumping into that 2_workbooks Excel file. This really just has all the answers in it. it doesn't have really what we need for it. Instead, we're going to be starting with a new notebook and instead importing in some data. So specifically, if we go into this folder of 0_resources into data sets, we have this one Excel file called data job salary monthly. Now this is similar to the data that we're going to be using for the remainder of the course. We're actually going to use another Excel sheet. But this one here is pretty neat because it's broken up by months into different sheets. So all the job postings for January are in this sheet called Jan, and so on for February, and so on for March. So what we're going to be doing in this lesson is moving, we want to just evaluate the January data, move that into a new workbook. So to get a new workbook as easy as possible, we're going to come over here to the File menu, and I'm just going to go to New, and click Blank Workbook. Now here I have that new notebook. Right now it's titled Book 2 because it hasn't been saved. Anyway, going back to that File menu just to show you, I have different options I can get a new notebook. So we went into New and just selected a blank workbook. Also, we could use this Home tab and select a blank workbook based on that. We also have a bunch of different tutorials you can check out. Also, we have this Open tab right here, which allows you on the left-hand side to select a location like this PC, or even browse different locations in your file system. But frankly, I'm using more often than not over here on the right-hand side, this right here, where this shows a past history of Excel files that I've worked with, so I can go through and actually select an Excel file pretty easily. We're going to explore more about this File menu more in a bit. Let's get into moving some data first. Now, before we get into copying this data into the new workbook itself, I want to actually just copy it within its own workbook. So if we notice some controls down here at the bottom, we have all the different sheets. If we want to add another sheet, which I want to copy it to, I'm just going to add this in right here, and I'm going to call this Jan copy. Press enter, and that's a new sheet. And I added that by just double clicking in there and then allowing it to edit it. Additionally, I can right click it and I can do things like rename it, and that will do the same thing. Now there's also some controls around here. As you notice, there's some arrows on right here. And what that does is just scrolls all the way over or incrementally over so I can see all the different sheets. In this case, there's more sheets than I'd actually see in one view. Then we have the scroll bar over on the right-hand side. This is actually just controlling the scroll area within our new sheet of Jan copy. So previously, we saw how we can copy ranges using a formula. In this case, I'm entering equal to, and then I'm just going to select this range right here, press enter, and I can get it inserted in. And then actually looking at the formula, it's just equal to J1 colon P8. And this has its range right there. All right, so I want to get the contents into this sheet. So I'm going to start by putting an equal sign. And then when I go over to that Jan sheet, and when I go over here, you're going to notice that now next to that equal sign, I have Jan, the name of the sheet, and an exclamation point. This is identifying the sheet. And I want all this different items. So as I go to select it all, you can see that it's updating in the formula bar. Right now I have A1 through P2 selected. But I actually want to select everything in this sheet, and we're about at 3,000 rows. And right now I'm only about 500 of those. This is going to take forever. So I don't recommend necessarily doing this type of method to try to select all your data. So I'm going to go ahead and escape out of this and go back to where we were at the Jan copy. Instead, once again, I'm going to press that equal sign, go back to that Jan sheet. Right up at the formula bar, once again, I can see that it has the Jan and the exclamation point. I'm going to select A1 to start with, and I'm going to press the shortcut, Control Shift, and then the right arrow key. And now all the top row is selected. From here, I'm going to continue to hold Control Shift and press Control Shift down. And it's going to select all the different arrows. So as we can see up here, A1 to P3103. Scrolling down, we don't have any more data. Now, all I have to do is press enter. And I did this to basically show the nomenclature now. So now we're not only selecting a range, but we're also selecting a range from a different sheet. And this is how Excel does the nomenclature or the formula necessary to make this work. And once again, there's a dynamic range appearing inside of here. But we really want to put it inside of here into this new workbook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually delete this sheet right here because we don't need this copy sheet in here. I don't want to actually manipulate my data at all. I'm going to right click it and select delete. It's going to prompt me anytime that, hey, you're going to permanently delete a sheet. Do you want to continue? Yeah, I want to continue. Now, once again, I'm going to go back to that original blank sheet that we have. I want to put it into here. So I'm actually going to name this one Jan, and then we'll call this one formula. Because technically it was a formula, not a copy. I don't know why I did copy before. Anyway, back into A1. Once again, I'll press that equal sign. And then going back to that other workbook, I will select it, the first cell in there, which is actually A1. And now we can see we have in the formula bar, which is actually the front of the bar, which is sort of strange. In the other sheet that our other workbook that we'll work with, we have inside of brackets the Excel file name, the sheet that we're in, and then the actual cell range of A1. We have dollar signs around this. This locks the references of it, which we're going to go into more detail on. But the main thing to understand is this has A1 selected right now. But we want to select all this data. So that shortcut of Control-Shift-Right, select all the different columns, and then Control-Shift down. Okay, it's all selected. I'm gonna go ahead and press enter, and it's gonna take me back to my original workbook that I was trying to work with this. Now that was using formulas to copy this data. We're gonna explore two more options. The second one is gonna be somewhat familiar using copy and paste. So I'm gonna create this new sheet, and I'm gonna call it Jan copy and paste. From here, I'm gonna go back to our original data that we have. And since we're at the bottom of the sheet, I'm just gonna select the bottom right-hand corner, press Control-Shift-Left. Now, if you noticed, it went and stopped at this blank cell right here, which isn't a big deal. I'll press it one more time. It'll go to the next cell over that actually has a value in it. And then once again, it's gonna go all the way to the end of A3103. So basically, if there's any blanks while you're trying to do this, it's gonna stop at those values there. Okay, and then from there, I'm gonna press Control-Shift-Up. And as we're seeing, it's gonna stop at every different blank cell along the way. This is gonna take forever. Unfortunately, I don't recommend you actually do that ever again. Instead, start up at the top left and do the Control-Shift over to the right, and then all the way down in order to select all the cells. Now, like we did before, we want to copy it. I could either use this up at the top in the home ribbon right here. I could actually select copy, or the shortcut, which I'm going to recommend, of Control-C. And from there, going back into our new workbook, selecting cell A1, and then using Control-V and pasting all this data in. Now, moving on to the third example, which is actually the one I recommend you do anytime you need to move sheets of data. Basically, in both of those previous approaches, you could go about missing getting data to move over. So I don't really recommend doing that. Instead, I would come down here to the Jan sheet, right-click it, and select Move or Copy. So we have this new window that pops up, and it has to book. Right now it has this Excel sheet selected of data, job, salary, monthly. We don't want to move to that. We want to move to book 2. We also move to a new book, but book 2 is open. That's what we've been working in. That's what we're going to move to. Okay, and we can see we have the different sheets that we've already made in there. And it says in this dialog, this is where you want to put this before this sheet. And we want it at the end, so we'll select Move to End. Now we don't want to take this sheet Jan out of here. We just want a copy of it. So we're going to select this Create a Copy and then click OK. Now Jan has moved over here, but I do want to actually differentiate this. So I'm going to put Move or Copy. Now in the next lesson, we're going to be exploring more about the ribbon, but we're going to be exploring now more about the File menu, or also known as Backstage View. We've gone through this Home, New, and Open. We also have this here for Share. This is available for, well, if you're sharing it via OneDrive, this makes it super easy to share with your coworkers. We're not going to go into a lot of detail of this, but this is a great option if you're working in OneDrive and you want to actually collaborate with other coworkers. You can work on Excel files at the same time. Moving down the list here, we also have Get Add-ins, and we're going to be actually looking at different add-ins we can use in the advanced chapters whenever we get to that. So we're working with some add-ins with that. Next up is Info, which has over here on the right-hand side some key metadata about our Excel file itself. Then if we want to get into actually protecting our workbook, which we're going to cover in a few chapters down the road, you can get into actually doing that. The only other thing that I find myself doing from time to time in this section is on version history. Once again, this requires you to be using OneDrive for it, but you could go back and revert back into a previous version that you work with. So it's great for that. Now moving into save or even save as, since we haven't saved it yet, they're both the same right here. I'm gonna go ahead and save this, but I don't wanna save this on OneDrive personal. I'm just gonna save this on my desktop. So I'll come and select desktop, and then I'll name this 2 workbooks and save it. Now beyond save as, we also have things like print, which I really don't find myself doing that too often. I should be sending an electronic version. Export if I wanted a PDF version of something. And then finally close as well. Same thing as this X up here, just to X out of it. Now there's 2 more areas down here that I want to call out, and that's account. And that allows you to actually see behind the scenes of what's going on with your Microsoft account. And this is generic to all the different Microsoft products that you have. So not just Microsoft Excel. As you can see from my information, I'm actually inside the Microsoft 365 Insider program. So I get a lot of access to insider features and get to experiment with new stuff before any other people do. Anyway, this is where you want to come anytime you want to make sure that you have your Microsoft products up to date. I have automatic updates available. So even when I check to update now, it's going to tell me, hey, I'm up to date. The other thing to note on this is the different Office themes that you have on this. I'm actually going to change this right now to use system settings, which on my Mac, I use dark theme. So it's going to go to that. The last 2 options are hidden down here behind more. I have feedback. So if I wanted to give feedback to this product, I'd probably go to something like X or Twitter instead. And then finally, options. We'll be getting to options later on in this, but this allows very much more advanced features that we can actually go in and customize using this menu, especially whenever we get into add-ins. We're going to be doing that from here. All right, so now you become an expert at how to manipulate different spreadsheets or sheets, along with manipulating them between different workbooks. In the next lesson, we're going to be going into this ribbon up here and actually exploring everything a little bit further and getting a sneak peek into each one of these. For those that purchase the practice problems and course notes, you have some practice problems to go through now and experiment working with different workbooks. With that, see you in the next one where we get into the ribbon. See you there. All right, in this final lesson of the spreadsheets intro, we're going to be getting into the ribbon inside of Excel and better understanding what are all the different tabs and what are their capabilities by doing some simple exercises. For this, we're going to continue to be analyzing that January data set that we worked from the last lesson, and we're going to actually get into performing some data analysis with it. So for this lesson, you can open and use that ribbon menu Excel file, which I have right here. And all the data that we're going to be working with, or that January data, is in this data tab, along with all the examples and all the different tabs. But I don't need this. I'm not going to work with this, so I'm going to close this out. Instead, I'm going to be working off where we left from last time in that 2 workbooks where we actually moved over that January data set. Now, quick disclaimer for any of these files that you're opening up, if you're noticing the security warning of automatic updates of links have been disabled, you can go ahead and just enable the content. And then click right here on Do Not Ask Me Again for network files and select Yes, because we want to make it a trusted document. Now, if you're getting any of these errors that the file has been moved, renamed, or deleted, because mainly you have it in a different location of what I had it, here's actually the address of the file that I'm using after I open it up. Anyway, this is the actual address of where the file is. Anyway, you can come down here and select these 3 dots on the file in question and just select Change Source. Go into Browse, and then from there, inside the actual file itself, select where this is. So in this case, it's looking for the dataset file of the data job salary monthly. I'm going to select it, select OK. And then it's prompting me now that this linked workbook hasn't been refreshed. Want to, I can go ahead and refresh it, and it's going to update it. All right, close out of this now. Anyway, that was all sort of silly because I'm going to go ahead and delete this Formula 1 right here and also this Copy and Paste tab right here. We only want to keep the mover copy, which is the actual sheet that we moved over that has all the data for this lesson. And I'm just going to rename this sheet Data. So let's dive into this Home tab. And this thing has a lot to do with formatting the text and how things appear within the spreadsheet. For example, I can select all these top rows right here. So basically A1 all the way to P1. I can change this font size to something like 12. For the fill color or the background color, I can change it to something like a light gray. Right now, it looks like it's already bold. I could turn it off or turn it back on. Inspecting all these different columns, I can see that some of it is hidden, especially here, this date column. I can see inside of here, this is the actual value, but whenever we actually look at it from afar, like it has these ampersand signs. So double clicking on the edge of that H column right here, it actually expands out and moves it where it needs to go. You can actually do this for all the column by just selecting all of them and then double clicking that last one. And then that expands it out all the way. We can see that that last column is, well, super long, so it has all the different skills. Typically these titles up the top, I'd like to maintain centered, so that way I know that it's a title, but I could move it to either side. Also, I can move it up or down if I wanted to, but we'll leave it right there in the center as well. Getting into the number formatting itself, I can actually go and select something like job posted date. It's going to select that whole column. If I wanted to, I can turn this into a date. So in our case, I want to do a short date. Now, other columns I would want to format are these salary year average and also salary hour average. So besides just clicking here, I can also just select that, hey, I want to use this as an accounting number format. And it's going to automatically put these decimal places at the end, 2 decimal places. Since we're in the 100,000s, I don't really care about it. So I'm actually going to remove them by saying decrease decimal, and I'm going to do that twice. Now for something like salary hour average, I'm going to also convert this to a currency. But for these may have 2 decimal places of values included in it, so I'm going to leave it. Now, so for the styles and cells portion, we're going to be getting into this more, especially into conditional formatting in the spreadsheets advanced chapter in chapter 4. So we'll save that for then. The next thing I want to do is get into this editing, and this is a pretty powerful feature. We can actually sort and filter our data if we wanted to. So what I'm going to do is actually select all these cells from P1 all the way to A1, and then come in here inside of editing, select sort and filter, and apply this filter. So let's actually get into filtering this data. Specifically, I'm wanting to investigate jobs or data analyst jobs in the United States, and specifically full-time jobs. We're going to be looking at the salary data for this. So I want to filter it down for it. So I'm going to select here, I'm going to unselect select all and select data analyst. And now it's going to filter for all the different data analyst roles. There's nothing else that's not there. Additionally, that job schedule type, I want to be looking at full-time roles only. I don't want to include any other ones, so I'll select full-time. I want the country. I don't want to be skewed by any other countries. I live in the United States, so I'm going to then select United States. And then finally, I only want to look at the salary or the yearly salary data. So I can actually come over here to the salary rate and select here. I only want to look at the year data. Okay, so now this has everything in it that I want. We're going to get to analyzing and visualizing this in a second. Before that, I want to talk about 2 other features. Add-ins, which we talked about before on how you access to the file menu. You can get to add-ins via this. And finally, analyze data, which in my opinion, isn't that strong of a feature. This tab uses a little bit of artificial intelligence behind the scenes for you to investigate. So it'll actually provide you different visualizations that you could actually visualize out of your data. And or even you can go as far as asking a question about maybe you want to see, hey, the distribution of salary rate or something like that. All you have to do is come down here and then insert in the chart that you want to insert in. I'm going to close out of this. Now we can see that we've made this salary distribution that we maybe want to visualize. Overall, though, I find that this analyzed data is pretty hit or miss, so I'm not using it very often. Now, the Insert tab is where I spend the second most of my time after the Home tab. They conveniently put it in the correct order. There's 3 major use cases that I'm using out of this. In Chapter 4, on the advanced use of spreadsheets, we're going to be going into tables. And then in Chapter 5, we're going to be going into pivot tables. But even closer to that, in Chapter 3, we're going to be going all into depth on how to use these charts. But let's get a sneak peek into this. Specifically, remember, we filtered this table down to data analyst jobs in the United States, and specifically full-time roles. We want to visualize this salary year average column. So with column M selected, I come up here to recommended charts. And it's going to give me a visualization of some, well, recommended charts. Now there's only 4 here. I can also select this other tab up here on all charts and actually try to see, hey, what would this look like maybe in a pie chart or a bar chart? Anyway, I want this in a histogram, which we're going to go into more detail on how to read this later. But all I have to do is just come in here, double click it, and it'll insert it in. Now, notice how whenever this was created, we now have new tabs appear inside of here. Specifically with this selected, we have this chart design and format tab. If I select off of it, those tabs disappear, and if I select it again, they reappear. This tab allows me to dive in and actually further customize these visualizations to how I want them to appear. I can even move them to, let's say, a new sheet, and I can title this something like histogram and then move it. The charts don't always necessarily appear just like that. Let's actually do a deeper analysis to see what are the different job title short columns available. I want to clear all these different filters on here. So I'm going to come back up here with this one row selected, come into editing, sort and filter, and I'm going to say, hey, clear all the different filters. Now selecting column A, going into insert and into recommended charts, it's recommended this clustered bar chart, which is actually what I want to view. So double clicking on this provides me a breakdown of all the different counts of the different job titles within our data set. And we can see things like data scientist, engineer, and analyst are some of the highest amount of job postings in this data set. Now, unlike our histogram example, this actually provides this data in a pivot table, which we're going to be going into in the pivot table chapter, which allows me to further manipulate the data. So say I want to actually sort this, I could right click the values right here and select, hey, sort smallest to largest. And then closing out this pivot table tab right here, I can actually see what is the highest amount of job compared to the lowest, which is cloud engineer. Now these remaining tabs, we're going to be going and hopefully rapid fire in order to cover these, as I find I'm using these less frequently than these other tabs that we previously talked about. The draw tab allows you to, well, draw on your spreadsheet. So I can just write on it if I wanted to, but I don't really find myself doing that except for maybe when I'm building dashboards. Besides that, use case is pretty rare. If I want to undo this drawing right here, I can come up here and click undo, or I can select Control Z and it'll remove it. The page layout tab is great if you're having to print out any data for those coworkers that are living the past and don't know how to accept things digitally. You can do everything from adjusting your page layout to adjusting the scale that you're actually viewing things. Now, personally, I find myself more using these sheet options right here. So if I go to this job count tab right here, if I wanted to, I could turn off the grid lines on here.